We've got one attendee so far. Hello, Mary. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on Butterflies of the Sunshine Coast. We're here with Rand Rudland and Tony Greenfield. Just a heads up to all of you that you are muted and your cameras are off. So don't worry if you're in your pajamas drinking wine, you're good. We do want you to be participating with us though. So you can go ahead and say hello in the chat module. Make sure that you've toggled it to message out to panelists and attendees so that we can all see your message. Let us know where you're joining us from today. If you have a comment, go ahead and put it in there. If you have a question throughout the webinar that you'd like Rand or Tony to be able to answer, please make sure that goes into the Q&A module. So that way we'll be able to make sure that all your questions are answered and you get all the butterfly information that you want and need. So I'm going to hand it over to you two gentlemen. Please take it away. So looking forward to seeing this. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you both for being here.
Okay, thanks, Lexi. Well, we will get started then. So yes, this is a joint presentation that Tony and I have put together as representatives of the Natural History Society and the Sergeant Bay Society. And this is relating to butterflies entirely on the Sunshine Coast. And so I'll just go through some introductory materials here. A basic outline of what we're going to do is here on the screen now. And we're talking about the order Lepidoptera, which is butterflies and moths. So we'll talk about what do they do, where do they come from, some of the differences, how to watch them, equipment of the trade. And then we'll get into the specific accounts of each species. And then we'll have a little bit of discussion about gardening and native host plants. And at the end, we'll talk about references and resources. So, you know, just a basic intro from my personal perspective, and then Tony will give his a little bit later. Butterfly watching sort of evolved out of being an ardent birder and spending a lot of time in the field. It was quite obvious that birds and butterflies shared a similar habitat, and watching one sort of led to watching the other. And from that point on, it was just a matter of seeing how many of these insects that I could photograph. And what you're going to see today is the result of a collection of those photographs. So just to put things in perspective, for those of you that have traveled to Mexico and Southern California, you may have seen the spectacle of the most famous butterfly that we have in the Americas, at least, and that's the Monarch. And this is just a really quick clip that I took at Santa Rosario Butterfly Sanctuary, just to give you an idea of what an extensive collection of butterflies can look like. So there's virtually millions and millions of these butterflies in this area, and when the temperature gets up to a certain level, they start to become active, and it's the most amazing sight to see. So, so what do moths and butterflies do? Well, they eat things. This is the leaf miner caterpillar, and it's a very small moth, obviously, but it specializes in eating the middle layers of the leaves where the chlorophyll is. So that's one thing that they do. The other thing is they eat a lot of foliage off of various trees. So the tent caterpillar moths we're all familiar with on the Sunshine Coast. They also eat commercial crops, and anybody that's got any of the brassicas out knows that they get holes in them, and they're probably from caterpillars. They also act as major pollinators, and when you see these butterflies with a lot of yellow on them, like this Claudius Apollo, this is not their native color. This is the color that comes from pollinating plants. So the other things, of course, they're prey for different animals and birds. And when you look at this swallowtail on the left, you can see this beak-shaped defect in the wing. And depending on whether the wings were in this position or folded up, you can get a mirror image on the other side. They're also prey in their to spiders in their larval form, like this Western tent caterpillar and a jumping spider. Or on the right-hand side, this Myleta crescent visited a flower, and lo and behold, the crab spider is now having lunch. So these are just some of the things that you can expect to see when you're in the field if you look closely. The next slide is just an indication of where the butterflies fit into this whole large grouping of Lepidoptera, the order that represents both, or that includes both butterflies and moths. The stats are there, but if you look at where the ancestors of the order came from, we're looking back about 300 million years. And the first moth fossil is actually about 190 million years ago. And then the true butterfly ancestor is actually 70 to 100 million years ago, which sort of parallels the onset of flowering plant evolution on Earth. So it's quite an interesting sequence, but you can see that the number of butterflies in relation to the total number of moths is quite small. And about 10% of the described species of living organisms are in this order. And so it's quite an impressive order. And I think, Tony, you wanted to make a comment at this stage. Is this an appropriate time for you to add any comments on them, or you want to do that later?
Well, I could say a couple of things right now.
Sure.
Hope I'm not repeating what Rand said, but there are some interesting or obvious differences between moths and butterflies. Moths are usually nocturnal. They're usually cryptically or dark colored because of their nocturnal habitat. And at rest, their wings are usually flat or horizontal. In the butterflies, most of them are diurnal, which means they fly in the daytime. Most of the butterflies are brightly colored. I mean, these are some of our most famous colored things in the universe, although there are a few dark ones too. And at rest, the butterflies generally have their wings in a vertical position. Rand referred to the, or we have it on the screen here, the 18,500 butterfly species in the world. I'll just give you some of the numbers for various other jurisdictions. In North America, there's 815. In Canada, 292. In BC, 187. In the Yukon, 86. And importantly, on the Sunshine Coast, so far to date, we have 42 species. It's going to be very difficult to add new species to this relatively low number. We may still find 3 or 4 more species, and they would be at the peripheries of our area, which means the tops of mountains, possibly offshore islands, or remote locations like the head of the inlets, like the head of Jervis Inlet or something like that. So we might add 3 or 4 more species yet. And there are a couple on the list that are sort of historical records that we have not seen in the last 10 or 20 years. And I've certainly been looking for a butterfly called the Dun Skipper, but no success to date. Just a couple of other things about butterflies. Their lifespan can be anything from 1 week to a maximum of just a bit less than 1 year. There are usually differences between males and females. As in the birds, the males are usually the colorful ones, and the females either less colorful or quite dark and devoid of color. One of our commonest butterflies is the Echo Azure, the little blue butterfly. And the males have a brilliant blue wing on the top side, whereas the females are kind of a dusky brown with a little blush of blue. I think that's about it, Rand. If you want to carry on from there again.
Okay, so let's just expand on what Tony has talked about here, defining characteristics. So, you know, everybody knows that butterflies have scales on their wings, and they have two pairs of wings. So this is sort of classic. Sometimes the best way to identify them is to look at the underwings. And this is, in some cases, the only way you can accurately identify these insects. The antenna shape is a significant factor to be able to separate out the moths as opposed to the butterflies. The top right-hand photo shows the very filamentous or comb-like antenna of the moth, and compared to the club-like antennas of the butterflies. And then if you do a microscope, electron microscope view of a moth, you get a much better feel for the scales that the moths and the butterflies carry. So, yeah, it's the scales are really only found in this group of insects, so they're pretty unique. The other thing that separates, or not separates, but is present in both of these groups is the sucking mouth parts. And so if you look at the moth on the right or the butterfly on the left, they both have this similar structure that allows them to reach the nectar deeper in the flowers. And when they're not using them, the one on the left shows the curled up proboscis underneath the mouth, underneath the eyes. And so when they're not using it, it's put away basically. So that's the sucking mouth parts. The other characteristic is the cocoons and the larval stages that the butterflies and moths have. And just as a reminder, we'll look at the life cycle of, first of all, the butterflies. Both butterflies and moths obviously start out with eggs. The interesting thing about the butterfly eggs is they tend to be positioned vertically as opposed to moths that aren't, as a rule. And then you get the larval stages that we see as caterpillars. And there's different stages that they go through as they grow. Once they get to their final stage, they go into a pupal stage. And in butterflies, these are solid, and they almost never use cocoons. And then from that emerges the adult. Some of the larval stages can last 3 to 4 weeks. Some of the pupal stages up to 3 weeks. And adults either a couple of weeks or they overwinter. And as Tony pointed out, some species will live for almost a year, some last only a matter of weeks. And then if you look at the moths, it's basically the same process, but the exception is, as I said, the moths tend to make a cocoon, and they simply draw in vegetable matter with silk threads and form a protective body around the pupa. So that's the main difference in the cocoon or chrysalis. So if anybody's really interested in these early stages, there's an excellent book out there available, Life Histories of the Cascadia Butterflies, referencing basically Washington, Oregon, and southern British Columbia. This book has all of the various stages of all of the butterflies that we have, and it's quite an intriguing read if this detail is of interest to you. So we'll talk about other resources a little bit later, but this is this is specific to the larval stages. So let's just, before we get into the species accounts, a couple of things, some people often ask, how do you actually study these and follow them in the field? And there's three issues here. One is binoculars. You really need binoculars at a minimum to be able to get a look at these to a level sufficient to identify them. And the other issue is, as is obvious from the presentation, is a camera. If you want to take photos and identify them in more detail or more accurately. And for research purposes, you pretty much need to be able to either photograph them or collect them. And since we don't collect them, it's pretty much down to photography. As far as catching them, you do need a net, and a net that has a fine mesh structure and at least a 12 to 18 inch opening allows you to catch most of the butterflies, although they are a challenge. And there certainly is a learning curve to do that. You'll find that out when you try it the first time. So yeah, that's the equipment that we use. Myself, I use a Canon camera with a 400 millimeter lens on it, and I'll often catch them and photograph them in the early morning when they're cool and not moving so much. So that is one of the tricks of the trade. So let's move on. Tony, is there anything else you wanted to add to that before we get into the species accounts?
Just another couple of things I was going to mention. You might wonder why we know them as butterflies. And there are various theories about this, lost in the mist of time. But two or three versions are, there is a Low German word, which I can't pronounce, which actually means butter liquor. Butterflies were thought to be attracted to milk products, whey, butter, and milk. So that's one version. That's the Low German word. Certainly in Western Europe, there's a well-known butterfly called the brimstone, which is yellow. And obviously there's a connection there between yellow with butter. So I think brimstone and butterflies became sort of synonymous. And there is another version, which I don't know, might be tongue-in-cheek, that the word should actually be flutterby.
Very good.
And as we know, butterflies are very colorful, and they've often been referred to as flowers that fly. Okay, Rand, back to you.
Okay. All right. So we'll move into the species accounts here, and I'll cover some of these, and Tony will cover some of them, and we'll chime in where we need to. This is the only introduced species we have on the Sunshine Coast. Was introduced back in the mid-1800s in Quebec, came from the Eastern Mediterranean area, and it's now in many places, Hawaii, Bermuda. It's in Australia, New Zealand, North Africa, and of course, all of the Americas. So this is, or North America anyway, this is an introduced species, and it basically likes the brassicas. So just to orient you to the composition of the rest of the slides as we go through the species, you'll see this general structure where the photos will be in the middle, more or less. On the bottom will be a bar that represents the observation times that we've made on the Sunshine Coast. You will notice that some of them have holes in those observation bars. That mean that either they have a break in the middle of the summer, or that we just don't know enough detail about it, about their timings. You'll also see sections that show on the left, the larval food plants, So this is where the eggs would be laid, and the larvae would feed on these plants through their various stages. And then on the right, the adult nectar sources. So these are preferred, but certainly not the only sources of food for the adults. And then on the photos themselves, you'll see some red arrows on occasion, or red markings that are the points of identification for common species or similar species. So that's the basic structure that you'll be seeing as we go forward.
Hey, Rand, just one question, my own question. What's POW, bottom left, POW?
Thank you. That was what I didn't tell you. POW means pupa overwinter. So the OW means how they overwinter, and you'll either see P for pupa, E for egg, or L for larva. So all of the different species have different means of making it through our winters, and some of them do it by eggs, by pupa, or larva. So thanks for pointing that out. I had overlooked that. So moving on, let's get to the first group. And this group is out now. I saw one yesterday. These are the skippers. They're often mistaken for moths because of their furry shape and so on, but clearly if you look at their antenna, these are not moth antennas. And you can see they have a relatively short flight period. They're going to be out for the next week or so, maybe a bit longer. It seems that our season is a bit delayed this year overall. The larvae overwinter, and this is the food plants looking like willows, birch, and alder. So yeah, this is our dreamy dusky wing that is out right now. Moving on to the next one, these are the other skippers. So the two-banded checker is also out now. I've seen that only once, but they are about. You can see the size of these is very small, less than 1 inch for the two-banded checkered, and they're very easy to miss. They camouflage well once they set, and you really do have to be alert. And the other thing that's shown on this slide is we break down skippers into two different types. Spread winged, represented by the one on the left, and folded wing by the woodland skipper group on the right. And you generally can put these into either of these groups fairly easily. To get the photo on the left with the checkered skipper with its wings folded takes some patience for sure. So the final skipper is one that has an interesting story to it. Back in 2017, I was up on Pender Hill looking actually for a different butterfly, an Anna swallowtail that Tony had seen the day previously. And as I was photographing the swallowtail, I noticed the skipper land next to me, and I popped a couple of pictures, but wasn't really interested because it was just a skipper. And expected to see many more. But as it turned out, when this was posted onto some of the discussion sites, it turned out it actually was the Oregon branded skipper. And this is had not been noted previously on the mainland of British Columbia. So we're just waiting for a genetic analysis to be done on a sample of this one that we actually did collect at the request of Chris Guppy, the BC specialist in butterflies. And that's now waiting to be analyzed in Ottawa. So this is an interesting find for us. And that's the comparison with the woodland skipper, just so that you're aware. So let's move on to the next group, and Tony will take.
Pause for a second there, Rand. We've had a question, if you wouldn't mind going back.
Yep.
You have nectar sources, chokeberry and composites.
Yep.
We're wondering what composites are.
Oh, the daisies primarily.
Okay.
Composite, the daisies, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So Tony's going to tell us a little bit about swallowtails and we'll move on from there. So fire away, Tony.
So if anybody has ever seen a butterfly on the Sunshine Coast, I'm sure it was one of the swallowtails. They're a very large butterfly, and they're very common. There are 3 species. The one on the left, western tiger swallowtail, and the pale swallowtail on the bottom are both very common in the springtime. And you can mainly tell them in flight or on a nectar source by the color. The western tiger is kind of a buttery color, and the pale is kind of a creamy, almost white color. The Anis swallowtail is kind of interesting. It is much the rarest of the swallowtails on the Sunshine Coast. And in fact, there are actually only a handful of records of it. That doesn't mean it's totally uncommon. I mean, we obviously don't see a lot of things. I actually saw a Anis swallowtail on the 28th of February one year, which I think is I'm not sure it's the earliest I've ever seen a butterfly, but it was down at the area in Howe Sound known as Dog Patch. And I was on the beach there on a sunny day, and suddenly this swallowtail came by. I was flabbergasted. Then it was sort of disappeared for 20 years, and I think we finally relocated it on the top of Penda Hill. It is a known butterfly. There's a lot of these butterflies do have a habit of, it's called hilltopping, and the males particularly like to fly on the bare hilltops. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but a number of them do that. The Anis swallowtail is attracted to anis, but one of its other preferred plants is parsley. And I was sort of dozing on my deck one summer day about 3 years ago, and suddenly this swallowtail came by, and lo and behold, it was an anis investigating my parsley plants. So that was quite exciting. These are large butterflies, and I have a hummingbird feeder at my house on the corner of the deck. And I once saw a swallowtail butterfly and a rufous hummingbird in a belligerent standoff. They were just going like this. One was trying to scare the other off. I'm not really sure who won that battle. So we have 3 swallowtails on the Sunshine Coast, but they are a kind of a widespread family. There's many species in the world. They go down into the New World tropics, and they all look similar to these ones. They're all variations of black and yellow. Okay, Rand, I think that's it for swallowtails.
Okay, so just to make the comment about the terminal band on the swallowtails, just look at the difference in the width. So you can often make that identification with the bandwidth, if you will, of these two. So just be observant of that. Okay.
So this is the Clodius Apollo, and again, it is quite a large family. There's a number of Clodius or Parnassian species in the world. They're actually well known because you can, can you see there? They frequently have transparent areas on their wings, so you can actually see through the wing. These Apollos on the Sunshine Coast, they occur from, I don't know if I've ever seen one right at sea level, but they do occur from the power line and up into the high elevations, right up into the, at least the subalpine. So it is a black and white butterfly, and
pretty large.
Sorry?
And pretty large.
Yeah, well, it's a medium-sized butterfly. some of Rand's information there, you can see that male's mud puddle. So this is a behavior of a lot of butterflies. If you get a damp or a wet spot or a seat or just a muddy area on a road, a logging road, often you do find a collection of butterflies there, sometimes of more than one species. And what they're doing is they're sucking the minerals that are in the mud. And it is a well-known spot to see and photograph butterflies. Okay. This is one of my favorite butterflies. It is quite a beautiful sight to see. Up in the left-hand corner, you can see it is a sort of an off-white, creamy color with no other markings on the upper side of the wing. And this butterfly is one of our earliest flyers. We start seeing it around the middle of April. And it is a cool season butterfly. By the time it gets to the heat of summer, they disappeared. So they do not like the heat. You can see the underwing with those sort of green or dark veins. So this can be identified without binoculars or camera. The confusion species, of course, would be the cabbage white, which does have the dark spots on the wings. So I'm a big fan of margined white. So one of the reasons is that it's one of the first butterflies that we see in the year, which is always kind of something to look forward to. Okay, Rand. So the margined white is an early season butterfly. The pine white is a late season butterfly. It doesn't start flying until August, generally. And at that time of the year, it is very common. It is a bird that a butterfly that you see around treetops, but it also comes down to ground level to nectar. You can see it nectaring on these composites. The black and white butterfly, and I think these would be males, and the females, well, that's the underwing there, but they are kind of grayish rather than a black. So this is a very easy butterfly to identify, and it is very common in August.
Right. Yeah, the female has this sort of reddish hue along the posterior margins of the one wing. So that's how you can tell it apart from the males as well.
So this is the western white, and this is a photograph that, did you take this, Rand?
Yep.
This is the only known record of this butterfly on the Sunshine Coast. Unfortunately, one of our butterfly watchers did have to leave the Sunshine Coast, move back to the city. Eric Habish discovered this butterfly on the berm at Sergeant Bay. And he put the word out, and Rand and I got it, I think both got it the next day. So it is the only time it's ever been seen on the Sunshine Coast. We will be watching for it to see if it shows up in other locations. It is not supposed to be a common butterfly here. You can see it, the flower that it's nectaring on is the northern aster, which grows in the little estuary at Sergeant Bay and a lot of other estuaries on the Sunshine Coast. And this was a August butterfly. So that would be the time to keep an eye on any areas of asters, really.
Right.
Hey, Rand?
Yeah, it's also known as a hilltopper. So the fact that it was seen at sea level, but is also expected in alpine habitats sort of gives us a broad range of possibilities.
I do believe this is my favorite butterfly on the Sunshine Coast. It's recently undergone a name change. It's now known as the Flora orange tip. And as you can see, it is a very beautiful butterfly with those orange wingtips and a white inner wing, dark body. What's really interesting about this species is that we really only have one location for it on the entire Sunshine Coast. Many years ago, I was actually doing a bird walk at the Ruby Lake Resort on their Wood Duck Festival. And while I was doing that, I saw one of these butterflies go by. And again, that was it. It was never seen again for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And then we were back at the Ruby Lake Resort one day to do another bird walk. And we were up on the power line above the resort. And lo and behold, these butterflies were everywhere. Just in a matter of a couple of hours, I saw, well, I didn't really count, but I certainly saw more than 30. And we now go back every year, and they are there on the power line above the Ruby Lake Resort every year. In April and the first part of May, so they are flying right now. It has been recorded at one other location, which was way up the logging road at the head of Narrows Inlet. So this butterfly might show up in other locations. It's sort of hard to know why it's confined to the Ruby Lake area. It's a larval food plant, as you can see in the information there, is bittercress. And there is quite a bit of bittercress on the power line at Ruby Lake, but that plant also shows up in many other places. So it's a butterfly that we may find in other locations. I hope you can see why I really like that butterfly. It is a real beauty. Clouded sulfur is an interesting species too. The sulfur family, which obviously are the yellow butterflies. There's a number of quite a lot of species across Canada and across North America. Mainly in the interior of BC and east of there. They do not like our temperate rainforest at all. They're usually associated with grasslands. And we only have 3 or 4 records of this species on the Sunshine Coast. And there's some question about whether it actually occurs here naturally. The other theory is that a lot of hay and alfalfa is trucked to the Sunshine Coast from the interior, from Kamloops or wherever. And there's a definite feeling that caterpillars arrive in the alfalfa or hay bales on the Sunshine Coast, and then the butterflies emerge at a later date. So there's a few question marks surrounding this butterfly. It is really our only yellow butterfly, I mean, completely yellow. So it's definitely worth watching out for. And this would be a later summer butterfly. Quite a few butterflies have changed their names recently. The taxonomists are always doing their research and renaming butterflies. So what I've always known as Reichert's copper is now the Mariposa copper. This is a fairly common butterfly at mid to high elevations. It's quite common up on the Karen Range, for example. I remember Rand and I were up there, I don't remember the date, Rand, but really we had them at a lot of sort of wet spots and seepage areas. They are a small butterfly, 1.25 inches. And you can see a really significant difference here between the males and the females. In this case, the female is the more elaborate, has the more elaborate plumage. The male is kind of that sort of monocolored brown color. So quite common in the mid to high elevations. Karen Range and Dakota Ridge, for example. This is a close relative, another one of the coppers. There's quite a lot of members of the copper family. Only 2 have been recorded on the Sunshine Coast, and the purplish copper is actually seems to be one of our rarest butterflies. I've only ever seen a couple, and we don't really know much about them. I have seen them at low elevations. One of them was certainly on the power line behind the airport. So that's one for us all to look out for. This is a family of tiny or small butterflies. They're all maybe only about an inch an inch tall or wingspan. This is another one that's changed its name. This is now known as the cedar hairstreak. And maybe we didn't mention, but on these slides, the initials there, LFP, stands for larval food plant. So this means this is the plant that the larvae or the caterpillars feed on. And as you can see there, it feeds on cedar and juniper. We don't have much juniper on the Sunshine Coast, but we certainly have a lot of cedar. The hairstreaks are a huge family. I don't know about worldwide, but certainly New World. And they all have this, see these white lines on the underwing? That denotes them as a hairstreak, but it gets very, very complicated beyond there. I certainly do get cedar hairstreaks in my garden. So they, I mean, I have a lot of cedar in the garden, as we all do. So they are quite a generalist. See them in the garden, presumably nectaring on exotic plants, but we also see them in the lower mountains, nectaring on wild strawberries. Almost everything I said about cedar hairstreak could be said about the brown elfin. It's quite a anonymous butterfly. It's small and brown, and we do see it at low to mid elevations. Again on wild strawberries. The elfin family. Obviously, the pine elfin, you'd imagine it has an association with pine trees. Now, we do not have a lot of pine on the Sunshine Coast. I mean, there's a scattering of pine everywhere, but not very many substantial stands of pine. But some of you may know, if you've ever walked up to the Chapman Falls on the trail from the power line, from the Selma Park Road, you do go through an area. It's on the would be on the eastern side of the gravel pit, and it is known as the Pine Flats. It's an area of very poor, gravelly, sandy soils, and it really only supports lodgepole pine. And we have found western pine elfin in this area, presumably to do with the pine trees, but they're not totally associated with pine. We have seen them on the Gray Creek logging road, for example, again in association mainly with wild strawberries where they nectar. This is always a good butterfly to see. We don't actually see it every year. So gray hairstreaks are one of the more common butterflies on the Sunshine Coast. Having said that, I mean, I put a lot of time in looking for butterflies last year, and I did not see a gray hairstreak all year, which kind of surprised me. They do occur in gardens. You can see on the data there, the LFP. It is a pest, particularly on cultivated bean crops. So gardeners are not always too happy when they see this butterfly. It is a sort of a grayish butterfly, and if you get a good look at it when it settles, you can quite easily identify it by those two very notable orange spots on the bottom of the wing, which can only mean it can only be a gray hairstreak. So that's mainly a low elevation butterfly, even in our gardens. This is another one that's changed its name recently. We always knew this as, what was it, Rand?
Western spring azure.
Yeah, Western spring azure. So it is now known by its Latin name, Silastrina echo. So we now know it as echo azure. It is a very common butterfly. That doesn't mean you're going to see it every day in every location. They are quite specific in their habitat. I mean, I do get them in my yard. In fact, I saw one 2 days ago in my garden. But they're often in areas like the power line, and they are a mud puddler. So they are attracted to mud puddles and definitely seep areas. The underwing has that quite specific black, the black dots on the grayish background. The males are bright blue on the upper side. The females are brownish with a bluish tinge. In the Northern Hemisphere, there's many species of blue butterflies, and they can be quite hard to tell apart. This is the only common blue that we have on the Sunshine Coast. It is flying right now. It flies in April and May. There's a partial second generation of this butterfly, and I know Rand and I did find a second generation one in early July on the Gray Creek or the crossover logging road, but mainly to be seen in April and May. And this is one you could go out on an area like the power line right now and probably expect to see.
Yeah.
So Rand and I have done quite a lot of work trying to build up the list of species of butterflies recorded on the Sunshine Coast. And we did make a trip to the top of Mount Steele in the Tetrahedron Provincial Park. I'm not sure if we were specifically looking for this butterfly, but we were definitely looking for anything we might find in the alpine. The top of Mount Steele is about 5,600 feet above sea level, 1,600 meters. And the top couple of hundred meters are in the alpine, so above the tree line. And a lot of butterflies are attracted to these alpine areas. There's a lot of butterflies around the world, including a lot of rare ones that do only fly in alpine areas. So Rand and I were up there in August in the Tetrahedron, Mount Steele on the top, looking for whatever we might find. And lo and behold, we found a blue butterfly. And they were fairly common. They were closely associated with the alpine lupins that grow in the alpine on Steele. And when we got back down and analyzed our the ones we captured and the photographs, it proved to be a silvery blue, which is a known inhabitant of these alpine areas. So we were very happy to find it on Steele. It's to date the only location we know of, but I'm assuming that it probably occurs on probably every alpine area all around the Sunshine Coast. But it may not occur below the alpine.
All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about one of the most difficult groups of butterflies that we have on the Sunshine Coast, and this is the genus Polygonia. And there's three primary species that are represented here. And as you can well imagine, looking at these as they're flying by represent a major challenge in identification. And the reality is, unless they're sitting, and in many cases, unless you can photograph the top and the underside of these butterflies, you may not be able to get an accurate ID. Just to give you an idea of the characteristics that we're looking for, you'll see them circled in red here. They have different patterns of these black spots on the leading edge of the hind wing. And they also have very unique patterns of light spots in the trailing dark margin. So between those two sets of characteristics on the dorsal views, you can often identify these three species. But when you can't be sure, then you have to look on the underside. And the one on the right is the easy giveaway, the green comma. You can see these two parallel rows of iridescent green spots. And then the other two are not quite as obvious, but after you look at a few of them, you realize that there's quite a difference in the inner and outer margins on the hoary comma, and also on the shapes of the comma themselves. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, because the reality is you have to spend just a lot of field time and a lot of time looking at multiple photographs to feel comfortable identifying these three species. They are a challenge, they're fun. They're often present in significant numbers at the crossover road in Tuanek. So for those that want to get out in the field and try their hand at this, this is an excellent place to go up to the bridge across the Grey Creek on the crossover road. The tortoiseshells, we didn't see a lot of these until a couple of years ago when a few showed up. They're very distinctive when you see them, because they really do look a brilliant orange, and they have this pattern of spots that's present here. Their larval food plants are red stem ceanothus, and the only places that we know of where these plants are found are above Ruby Lake, and now the Botanical Society, the gardens have planted some. So we're wondering if maybe these will entice this species to breed here, because up until now we only see them as migrant species coming in from the south. So it's going to be an interesting species to follow. They do breed in the interior of southern British Columbia, but so far we have no understanding as to whether they breed on the Sunshine Coast, at least not yet. Let's see. The other tortoiseshells that we get on the coast, neither of them are extremely common. The Compton tortoiseshell is an interior species as well. From an identification purpose, this eye that you see here, as it's called, is really the main identifying feature of this species. So keep a watch out for this tortoiseshell, but they tend to want to lay their eggs on birch, and we don't have a lot of native birch on the Sunshine Coast. So there's a number of introduced species of birch or varieties of birch, but this photo was actually taken in my front yard, and we do not have any birch, so it was obviously passing by. On the right is a slightly more common species, the Milbert's tortoiseshell, and it likes to lay its eggs on stinging nettles, which of course aren't very popular with gardeners, but it's unfortunate that we tend to remove stinging nettles, and in so doing we end up removing the preferred habitat for the larval stages of this particular species. So if you do have an area of stinging nettles that you can sort of set aside and protect from people walking into it, it would be very useful for this species to try and entice them to be in larger numbers on the coast. Tony, you wanted to say something about the Mourning Cloak.
So the Mourning Cloak is a large butterfly, one of our largest butterflies. also one of our earliest butterflies. It's flying by nice warm days in the middle of March. It is a cool season butterfly. You very rarely, almost never see them in midsummer. And then they do fly again somewhat in the fall. So this is a March, April, May butterfly, and it can be quite common if you drive up the Grey Creek Logging Road and over to the Crossover Road, or even going up to the tetrahedron, Mount Elphinstone. You often disturb a lot of these butterflies as you're driving. They fly off the road in front of you. So it is a large butterfly, and it's actually quite powerful. I did catch a couple in nets when I was first starting out, and it really felt like the butterfly was dragging the net out of my hand. It's got a very powerful wing beat. It is very distinctive.
Oh, sorry, Tony.
Okay. It's very distinctive, really can't be confused with anything else at all. It's got the dark sort of cloak, where it gets its name, Mourning Cloak. It's surrounded by those blue dots and that creamy outer edge to it right around the wings. It's interesting. This is a famous butterfly in the United Kingdom, where it is known as the Camberwell Beauty. And Camberwell is a southern suburb of London. It is not a common butterfly in the United Kingdom, and people get quite excited when they see one of these over there. It does fly late in the year, again in the fall, and it does hibernate as an adult. So I live in a cedar house. It's an A-frame, and let me see. It was on the 27th of September, 2014. I found one of these butterflies in my bedroom. So that was quite an event. I guess he was, they only need like a couple of millimeters to crawl in through a crack, and he was planning to winter in the bedroom and then fly again in the spring. So I was quite honored about that. Okay, Rand, thank you. This is another very well-known butterfly. In fact, it's, I think it has the most wide distribution of any butterfly in the world. And it occurs all over the world except in Antarctica. It's called the painted lady, and in our area, it is a migrant. So it does not breed here. And from year to year, it's extremely variable. We go entire years without seeing a single painted lady on the Sunshine Coast. And other years, it's very, very common. In fact, in those big migratory years, there's literally billions of these butterflies migrate into maybe Canada or BC. We're on the western edge of a migration right here on the Sunshine Coast. So in good years, we can get quite a few of these. They are very attractive, and they occur at all locations, all elevations from sea level to the alpine. There is a confusion species that we will be looking for. It's known as the American lady. Its northern limit is approximately Seattle, but it has been recorded in BC, and hopefully one of these years we will find one on the Sunshine Coast. Okay. The Red Admiral. This is not a common butterfly on the Sunshine Coast at all. And the larval food plant Rand was talking about, stinging nettles. So this butterfly does need stinging nettles to lay its eggs and to hatch a new generation. So we usually only see well, I should say there's maybe 3 or 4 keen butterfly observers on the Sunshine Coast. And between us, we only see maybe 3 or 4 of these in a year. So they are quite uncommon. They can occur from anywhere from sea level to the alpine, and they are very identifiable. I don't think we have an upper wing pattern, but there's lots of red and dark, and they are very, very distinctive.
Almost impossible to get an open wing shot on this species. It just never seems to settle. I have tried for hours and never been able to get them to open their wings.
So the fritillaries are, again, a large northern whole Arctic butterfly family. There's many, many species in North America and around the Northern Hemisphere. We only have 2 on the Sunshine Coast. And this one is a mountain butterfly. It only occurs from mid-elevations up to the alpine. And the most common area that I see them is the trails and roads at Dakota Ridge, or also on the Karen Range. The word high dasp, strangely, is named after a river in the Himalayas in Kashmir. I don't really know why it was attached to one of our local butterflies, but you can see it as it's an attractive orange and dark butterfly. It's a late season butterfly, late July, mainly in August and September. Up in the, around 1,000 meters elevation would be a good place, like Dakota Ridge. Dakota Ridge is at 1,045 meters, so it can be very, very common up there. It's where you see it nectaring on things like pearly everlasting and thistles. Okay. This is the other fritillary. They are I'm going to say there's 10 or 12 species in BC, and they can be quite difficult to identify, but they often fly in different ecosystems and different regions of the province. So this is one of only 2 that we have currently identified on the Sunshine Coast. That's known as the Western Meadow or Pacific fritillary. And it flies, I would say, from low to mid elevations. I've seen it at both. I have seen it in my garden. Strawberry is another, wild strawberry is another nectar source that's quite popular with a lot of our local butterflies. And okay, I guess that's it, Rand. The crescents are, there's a number of crescent species, usually known as the Miletus. And this is a common butterfly. Not always common, but it can be common on logging roads and sort of, some of the trails in the Wormy Lake or Fair Lake area. It's a small butterfly, and it's quite easy to identify. I mean, it's something that I would be able to identify without binoculars. You can see that pattern. It's just brown and mainly orange, and there's really not anything that it could be immediately confused with, except for the second species that I think Rand is going to show us.
No, that's it.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess the second species that I was referring to is known as the field crescent.
Yeah, I didn't put that in because it's only been seen once and long ways away. Yeah.
Yeah, Rand had a field crescent. Again, I think it was at Narrows Inlet, was it, Rand?
Narrows, yes. Yeah.
So only been recorded once, but not totally unexpected. I think it occurs over the hilltop in the Squamish area. So that's why it would be good. We're sort of anxious to do more work on the on those logging roads at the head of the inlets, like Clahome, Narrows, and Jervis Inlet, where we may turn up something that, I mean, I should say that when we refer to the Sunshine Coast, we're actually referring to the administrative area of the Sunshine Coast. So this would be the entire area of the SCRD, which does take in all of those to the height of land around all of the inlets. So around Salmon Inlet, Narrows Inlet, Jervis Inlet. So there's a lot of terrain out there that is not immediately accessible from the the lower Sunshine Coast. This is one of our more common butterflies. It's mid to late summer, and it really is quite common on the logging roads. Also in your garden, it's common around Buddleia. It is very distinctive, really can't be confused with anything else locally. Maybe I should mention Buddleia right now. I'm sure all the members of the Botanical Garden Society are probably familiar with Buddleia. Something of a mixed blessing. It has been deemed an invasive species. I mean, it does pop up all over the Sunshine Coast, in gardens, logging roads, clear cuts, whatever. I don't consider it to be a big, huge problem myself. And it is probably the #1 plant or flower that attracts butterflies. So I certainly have 2 or 3 really big Buddleias in my garden that usually attract a large and regular clientele of swallowtails and Wilkins admirals. That may not be to everybody's taste, but there we go. This is another common, can be very common. And as you can see, very distinctive. I mean, there's nothing else like this on the Sunshine Coast. It starts flying in August, maybe late July. And it's really a grassland species. So you're likely to see it in areas of, late summer dry grass. It does nectar on flowers. And, these eye spots really are, certainly on the Sunshine Coast, it cannot be anything but the common wood nymph. There's a series of other wood nymphs in North America and even the interior of BC. But here on the coast, you should see this one in August, no problem.
Okay. So the final species that I'll just make a comment on is another new species for us last year. This is the greater Arctic, and this again is one of the hilltoppers, and I've only found it on the top of Pender Hill or on the top of Mount Daniels, although we've still got a few hilltops to explore. But this is a really interesting looking butterfly, and what's interesting about it is on the back, on the dorsal aspect of this male on the right, these very dark patches are actually areas of pheromone production that this particular species uses for attracting mates. So when you see this species with its wings open, and this one cooperates a bit better, this very dark patterning indicates a male. So it's very poorly known on the mainland. It likes grasses. It's only been seen, June and July up on the top of the mountains, and hopefully we'll be able to find more locations of this, as we explore different areas at higher elevation. So that finishes off the species accounts. So just a couple of slides here on, what we can do to encourage butterflies and bees for that matter, but just a list of some of the nectar plants that are enjoyed by butterflies, and I won't read through them. You can take a quick look, and then they'll be posted on the YouTube channel when this goes public. But a lot of these we could very readily cultivate and benefit the butterfly populations. Same thing with the herbs. We don't really think of herbs as being butterfly plants or bee plants, but all of these that are listed would be very helpful for promoting habitat for our flying friends, unfeathered friends. Some of the native host plants, also common in different areas: Saskatoon, hardhack, the stinging nettle in the top right, and Pacific ninebark is actually fairly common, especially in places like the power lines. So this is a tree that we could readily plant, but it does grow quite large, so you would have to have adequate area for that. A comment about fall raking of leaves. Just remember that making your lawn totally clean and devoid of dead leaves actually isn't the best of circumstance for butterfly and moth larvae, but also for other smaller shrews or salamanders or frogs that use the leaf litter as protection and hunting territory. So just remember that in the fall, even if you, pile it up and leave it in a secluded area rather than totally putting everything in the compost for the winter. So some comments on references. These are the books that Tony and I tend to use the most. Probably the older book is The Western Butterflies by Peterson. Probably we don't use it very much now because there's more advanced guides out there, but a lot of people may have this, and it's certainly a useful tool to have. It's also the right size for a pocket in the field. So one that isn't going to be taken in the field is Chris Guppy's book, Butterflies of British Columbia. And I should say Chris has been very helpful for us in helping with identifications of species that have been a challenge, primarily the Polygonias. Yeah, this is an older text now, but has a lot of detail on BC butterflies. Tony uses the Butterflies of Canada by Laborie. Very good reference as well, but again, this is a table book, not something you're going to take in the car with you. And the one that we probably use the most right now is Pyle's book, The Butterflies of Cascadia, for our field use. This is an excellent book. It has all of our species in considerable detail, and it's more than adequate for all of our needs in the field. So those are the books that we use. Some of the internet resources, those of us that are in the field a lot like to post our sightings on this citizen science site, eButterfly. And in the email that came out to you with the reminder, you'll find the links to these sites. And they're very easy to sign up for. They're very easy to use. If you are a photographer and want to post any photos, this is certainly one place that you can do it. And it contributes to citizen science of this group of insects. I started an email group for those interested in butterflies and dragonflies. And so if you want to get any regular emails that relate to these two groups, just go to this site and sign up, and I'll admit you into the group, and any sightings, photos, questions, whatever, you'll be able to see the email and the discussions that come from that. The other area that I've also become very interested in is iNaturalist, and this is a site that's international with many millions of observations and hundreds of thousands of species. But I've started a site called Butterflies of the Sunshine Coast, and the link also is in the email that you will have received. If you go to that, you can see photographs taken by everyone on the coast who submits photographs to iNaturalist. And I think at this stage we've got all but I think 2 species photographed and included in this site. So this is a really good reference if you just want to specify a particular species and look at what's available in the way of photographs of specimens taken on the Sunshine Coast. The final thing that I've sent out, and I don't think you've received it yet, or maybe Lexi can clarify, but this is a compilation of all of the flight times as of the end of 2020 that we have for all of the species that we know of on the coast. This is a living document, so if we extend the time frames, it will be updated as available. But anybody that's interested in this, feel free to print it out and carry it with you. It's often useful to narrow down what you might think you saw in at any particular time of the year on the Sunshine Coast.
And just to clarify, this will be emailed around as a PDF from the Botanical Garden sometime in the next few days. Probably before Sunday, I'm going to say.
Okay, perfect, thanks. And then the final slide is just a pitch that Tony and I put out this Butterflies of the Sunshine Coast 2 years ago now, which means it's already 3 species out of date, but that's the way things go. It's available at the bookstore in Sechelt and at the bookstore in Madeira Park. It's a fundraiser for the Sunshine Coast Natural History Society and the Sergeant Bay Society so that we can continue production of these. And if anybody wants to have this, it's a good field guide that covers all of the species that were known at the time of printing. So I will close it off there and make my final comments. I hope everybody enjoyed what we've presented, and we hope once COVID is over, we'll be able to get back to some of our butterfly and dragonfly field trips through the Sunshine Coast Natural History Society. And people are most welcome to join us. And I hope some people will become avid field watchers and be submitting to some of these locations. So I'll leave my comments at that, and Tony, you can finish it off.
Well, I don't really have too much to say, but I've been a birder for 50 plus years, and I got interested in butterflies a few years ago. I think Rand referred to that earlier. If you're going to be watching birds being out there watching birds, you may as well watch butterflies too. And but beware, it does get very addictive too. So Rand and I, we like to build up our checklists and our personal lists, and I think we have 42 different species of butterflies on the Sunshine Coast right now, and we're very anxious to find the next 1 or 2 or 3. And anyway, we'd like to welcome anybody else to the hobby. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Rand. Tony, thank you both so much for your knowledge and your expertise, and the amount of information you have given us in this short session is amazing. So this is being recorded. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will want to go back and review and look at all those notes you had in the slides, which is great. If you have questions, please make sure they're getting into the Q&A panel. But I'm going to start going through what we have here. So our first question is, are there a large percentage of butterflies that travel like the monarchs do, or do many of them stay here on the coast? And so it looked like from the slides that most of them are on the coast and just a few are migratory. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the majority of our butterflies are resident. And there's only 2 or 3 species that actually come here every year, or sometimes don't come here every year, like the painted lady, for instance. Tony?
And the tortoiseshells are largely migratory too.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So our next question was that I've heard that cabbage moths are territorial and that it's possible to fool them with a lookalike decoy. Is this true?
I personally don't know the answer to that. I'd be interested to know.
I presume that was cabbage butterfly, not cabbage moth.
It came through as cabbage moth, but I'm guessing it's cabbage butterfly was the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not heard of anything about decoys.
Okay, I think that Bronwyn, you're going to have to go ahead and you research that for us and get back to us and let the garden know. I'd love to know what you find out. Next question is silly, but I'm going to ask it anywhere. Woolly bear caterpillars as a predictor of weather, fact or fiction? And Mary will want you to know she put in the Latin for the caterpillar in there too, but I'm not going to pronounce it. So can woolly bear caterpillars predict the weather?
Well, if they can, I don't know about it. I think it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know of any data.
I'm going to decline that question because it is the caterpillar of a moth.
Oh, there we go. There we go. People do want to know about moths. Actually, we've got another question coming up on moths in just a second. But
I hope I snuck out of that one.
Yeah, I think you did. That was graceful. Good on you. Not on topic. So next question is, are the hilltoppers drawn to the area by the elevation or the plants that grow there?
Well, I would say that the different species hilltop at different elevations. So, we found that the Pendahill and Mount Daniel are those areas on the top of those mountains. They're bare rock. They face south and east, south and west. They're very hot and dry, largely devoid of vegetation. They have a lot of dry grass, and they do attract certain species. But the hilltoppers that are attracted to, for example, the top of Mount Steele, which is 1,600 meters elevation, are totally different species. Not necessarily different species, but most of them are. So I think it's a question of both elevation and the botany.
Yeah, and I think the other issue with hilltoppers is that they often, the males and the females end up going to the tops of these higher elevation areas simply to find each other and mate, and then the females will go back down to lower elevations to lay their eggs. So I think it's a multifactorial issue, but that I know that's certainly part of the answer to that.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Sorry, Rand mentioned this. We have been exploring the top of Mount Daniel and Mount Pendahill in Penda Harbor. We would love to find some more hilltops at those kind of elevations that are quite easy to get to, but there's not very many of them on the Sunshine Coast.
Sure.
I mean, we did try, we tried Soames Hill in Howe Sound, but basically drew a blank.
Yeah. So the last question we had, it came into the chat here, actually second to last, and it's about moths, Tony, so fair warning. And the question was thoughts of something similar for moths. And I'm thinking that this has to do with resources. And so I can just quickly speak to that. iNaturalist is a great resource for anything in the natural world. I'm just starting to learn about it myself. Do either of you have any resources that you've used with regards to moths?
There are some very good texts, and you can even, one online is eFauna BC, and you can actually select out Lepidoptera and go and find the moths pretty well reported there. But there's no question moths are understudied, and a book on the moths of British Columbia will be a number of times larger than for the butterflies, just because of the volume of the number of species. So.
Okay, and our last question here, and is it only the males that puddle, and if so, why?
No.
I think it is largely the males that puddle, because across all of these species, the females can be very, very hard to find and detect. They tend to stay hidden, and the males are, out there in the sunshine and the and mud puddling, and somehow they do find the females better than we can. I mean, most of the butterflies that I see are actually males.
Yeah, I think part of the process of mud puddling is to accumulate minerals that are actually passed to the female during copulation to improve the viability, if you will, of the eggs. So it's an interesting process. Yeah.
That is interesting. And I think we'll leave it there. Thank you both so much. This has been wildly informative. And for those of you that really enjoyed it, and I know all of you did, Rand will be back next month talking about dragonflies. So we'll get to see more of his amazing wildlife photography and more of this amazing information as well. That's about it. Thank you both so much. I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing your knowledge about all of this and getting us all sparked up about what we can find in the field. Thank you both. Thank you to everyone for joining us as well, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you.